Good morning to all the members of the press. I thank you for being here as we report on the progress being made in the setting up of the agency and the work that they're getting on with for the recovery of the BVI after the events of the last year. As reminded, the Recovery and Development Agency was established earlier this year, actually on the 27th of March is when the legislation was taken to the House. The Virgin Island Recovery and Development Act 2018. The agency's responsibility is to be accountable to all stakeholders for the implementation of the government's Recovery and Development Plan through an effective, efficient, and transparent process. The objective of the agency is to manage on the government's behalf that portion of the territory recovery process set out in the plan. It was no secret that last year's unprecedented trail of disasters resulted in extensive damage to the social, physical, and economic infrastructure of the Virgin Islands. The agency will help to manage the complex recovery process according to the policy direction of the government. A chief executive officer of the agency is appointed by the board of the agency in concurrence with the cabinet on such terms and conditions that the board may determine. The function of the chief executive officer include to coordinate and monitor activities relating to the implementation and execution of the plan, including capacity building, to implement or cause to be implemented the direction and the decision of the board of the agency, ensure that funds are used as prescribed by the board, and to proactively pursue and attract financial investment to support the Virgin Islands recovery and development efforts, and among other responsibilities. Due to anticipated size and complexity of the work to be undertaken by the agency, projected to be in the region of up to $1 billion over a 5-year period, it was agreed that a highly experienced individual with a background in this type of effort should be sought for the post of Chief Executive Officer. In February of 2018, the search began for a suitably qualified Chief Executive Officer via advertisements made through the territory, through online media, GIS, and the Recovery and Development website, through CARICOM and the OCS, and internationally through The Economist. A total of 27 applications for the post of Chief Executive Officer was received. A scoring process was used to rank the suitability of the CEO candidates based on the following criteria: senior management experience, transparency, and good governance in multicultural international environment, communicating a strategic vision, organizational skills, program development, integrity, and communication skills. The top 6 highest scoring candidates were interviewed, and each candidate was required to make a presentation on the approach to leading the Recovery and Development Agency. In the end, 2 candidates were selected for on-site interviews. They came to the BVI in May for follow-up interviews and sensitization to the recovery and development issues on the ground. Based on these interactions, Mr. Paul Bailey was selected by the board of the agency as the most suitable candidate, and an offer was made to Mr. Bailey, which he accepted. Mr. Bailey has extensive international experience as a former civil servant, a military officer, and investment banker. His experience as a permanent secretary in Fiji, who led that recovery after Category 5 cyclone devastated those islands. He has extensive experience in providing investment banking and development advice to private companies, local authorities, central government agencies, and has led government and development teams in a career that has spanned England, Southern and Eastern Africa, New Zealand, and Australia and the Pacific. He also has broad experience working with development partners in developing policy and delivering sustainable development programs, including employment of different financing mechanisms, mobilizing donors, managing funds, and building relationships between government and civil society. So here we are. We recognize that recovery presents a monumental opportunity to rethink, replan, and reconsider the future of this territory. We look forward to Mr. Bailey assuming duty shortly, and I look forward to us building our Virgin Islands better, stronger, greener, and smarter. At this time, I'd like to invite His Excellency to make some remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honourable Premier, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As the Premier said, this is an important point of time for the Recovery and Development Agency and for our recovery overall. We also, in addition to the Chief Executive Officer of the RDA, now have the full board in place. For clarity, I've appointed. Those are nominated in different ways as set out in the legislation, but the full board is Robert Matavius as chair of the board, Clarence Faulkner as deputy chair and currently as acting chair, Maria Mays from the Governor's Office, Clyde Letsom representing the private sector, Pastor Gregory George representing the sister islands, David Hancock, who is there as the UK representative, Shari de Castro, there as a representative from young people, and Monica LeBennett, who represents the Caribbean Development Bank. She's the vice president, holds the position of vice president of the bank. We have a very strong board in place. We now have, as the Premier has set out, and it's excellent news, we have an experienced and capable CEO, Chief Executive Officer in place as well, appointed by the board with Cabinet's concurrence as well. We also have experienced and capable people in the BVI here as well, who will be working, as Paul Bailey forms his team, we're working quickly to make sure that we are taking the recovery forward. So this is an important step. We have now the building blocks in place for the long-term recovery. I know that the Premier and I share, and all of Cabinet shares the priority that we continue our recovery at pace. We have the legislation in place. We have the Recovery Development Agency board fully in place. We have a Chief Executive Officer now appointed and taking up position soon. We have money in place through the CDB initial loan, as well as we have the offer of the UK loan guarantee as well. We have the fundamentals to now get on and continue our recovery at pace. So today I'm very pleased that we're at that point with the CEO in place, all of our fundamentals there, and I look forward to now working with the Premier, with the RDA board, and when Paul Bailey takes up post, to make sure that we continue our recovery at pace. Thank you. Sorry, I should say I'm handing over to Mr. Faulkner for some remarks as well.
All right. Premier, His Excellency the Governor, good morning, press. Thank you for the remarks and for your vote of confidence in selecting the Board of Directors of the Virgin Islands Recovery and Development Board. On behalf of the members of the board, we are humbled that you have entrusted us to take up the mantle, which is the RDA, and to execute as legislated. The BVI's recovery and development is a daunting but essential task. It is truly an honor to be involved. The RDA's journey to reach to this point has not been without its challenges, understandably so. It is new. It represents significant change that aims to promote effective communication, efficiency, capacity building, timely execution, and a modern approach to building resilience into the fabric of both our social and economic environment. One critical element that is vital to our success is the appointment of this Chief Executive Officer. To the Governor and Premier and the members of Cabinet, we say thank you for the expeditious review and approval of our recommendation in getting Mr. Paul Bailey to the RDA. Paul brings to the territory a wealth of experience, having been the former Permanent Secretary of Infrastructure and Transport in the Fiji Islands, leading recovery in the wake of a Category 5 cyclone that devastated those islands back in 2016. Government has been developing the BVI Recovery to Development Plan, a blueprint which incorporates wide consultations from stakeholders across the territory. The plan represents, for want of a better description, the government's statement of requirement, the RDA's marching papers. The RDA, although accountable to government, is independent of government and will execute its mandate accordingly. Let me be clear, the RDA does not promote, intend, or wish to be a second government. The RDA, as legislated and mandated, is charged with the implementation of the government's approved development plan. However, this plan is also part responsibility of the government and the respective ministries. The plan from a macro perspective can be divided into two areas: policy, which should be led by government and the respective ministries, and implementation of the infrastructure that enables the execution of those policies. The board was appointed in early May. We have an aggressive schedule. We are making progress. Our members, reflecting the BVI and the UK, are on the job. We have established an implementation task force with representatives from the BVI, the UK, and the private sector to get on with the detailed work to not only establish the RDA's operating capacity, but importantly, create a structural environment in which we will function efficiently and effectively with the implementation of the assigned mandate. Finally, the recovery to development plan of these Virgin Islands does not rest solely with the government, the governor, or just the RDA. The recovery to development needs all of us. The notion or the excuse that we are waiting solely on government should not stifle our efforts to restore pride and rebuild these islands. Again, on behalf of the board of the RDA, I thank you for your vote of confidence, Governor and Premier, and I look forward to working for the betterment of these islands.
Good morning, Governor Radio. It was mentioned both by Premier Smith and Governor Jasper that Mr. Bailey is going to be here soon. Can we get a time frame to exactly when he's going to be here?
I would say within a month.
Okay, and in terms of attracting financial support, because we know money would be one of the most important things for the agency at this point. In terms of attracting financial support, where do you plan to go for that support?
I will say the world is our platform. The RDA and the territory, obviously with the support of the government. Part of the mandate of the CEO is also to seek financing. And obviously once we receive the approved development plan, we then have a specific formula or blueprint of the type of financing we will need to carry out those projects.
Connor Devitt, BVI Beacon, thank you for having us today. Since the Recovery and Development Agency Act has been passed, has government sought any financing from other banks?
There has been some discussions. As you know, we received financing and loan from the CDB already. There have been discussions with other banks, but we have to get the arrangement with the guarantee from the United Kingdom before they can be finalized.
What other banks have you had discussions with?
I won't be able to give you the name at this point in time because we started those discussions. But as soon as we have further information and further developments with other banks, we'll be able to let you know.
Malika McPherson, Island Sun newspaper. I cannot direct this question to any direct member because all of you would have to answer given how broad it is. We've heard about efforts to establish and get the CEO here, and you mentioned a blueprint, Mr. Faulkner, but can we have a timeline as to when we can actually see physical activities on the ground, because it's already been a year, we're just almost at September. Can we have a timeline? And I guess that would require the Premier talking from a finance aspect, the Governor, you're talking from yours, and Mr. Faulkner from the RDA perspective.
Do you want to go first and then I'll try?
Actually, when it comes to recovery, as you would appreciate, the recovery effort has been ongoing from day one. We had immediate response to recovery. And as we speak, we continue doing work towards that recovery. There's been work done, for example, on reestablishing the courts, reestablishing the House of Assembly, and other government facilities, as well as work on the infrastructure, the roads. And there's planning going on even now as we speak on the reestablishment of the sewage systems in the country, and many other functions that work is undergoing. What we're expecting is acceleration of the delivery of these projects once through the RDA, and once all the funding is ready to be assessed.
Thank you very much. Just to complement and add to what the Honourable Premier has said, The priority which we all share is about the pace and increasing the pace of recovery. We've now got all of the building blocks in place, as we've highlighted from different aspects of that. Premier and I in Cabinet have been discussing the priorities for the next few months and how we make sure that we get a clear plan for the RDA to take forward to deliver immediate priorities so people can see the change, whether that's getting ready in terms of tourism or more ready in terms of tourism, cleaning up, socially ready in terms of schools, housing, shelters, etc. Government ready, where we made, as the Premier said, progress on aspects but need to increase that progress in a number of areas, and getting business ready as well, that we help businesses effectively, and we also, with the public service transformation, a different topic, but we help to reduce any hurdles that may be in the way. But the next step is also about as you touched on, the financing. So we have an offer of a UK loan guarantee. Essentially what that means is that thanks to the United Kingdom, BVI can access cheaper and higher amounts of financing. So it goes out with the backing of the United Kingdom. The next step is the long-term plan, which I know the Premier is with Cabinet working on. That plan sets out what the long-term priorities are. There's already been substantive consultation on that. And then the ability to raise money to back that. That won't be all the money at once, because we need to tailor that to specific projects, and there's no point taking in lots of money and then not using that all immediately, because there'll be short-term as well as long-term areas. But that's for the RDA to work through those priorities that are set by the government to make sure that we have a clear route for delivering and getting the funding in to deliver.
Thanks. Specific to your question, one of the things you would have heard me mention is the matter of an implementation task force. We have not sat back and wait for simply the appointment of the CEO to get on with the work. What we have put in place is an interim team that can keep moving with many of the projects that have started since the passage of the storms last year. Now, that said, the plan that is being discussed and will be approved by government, that plan, once we receive it, will now be broken down into two basic areas. What you consider social or, social quick wins, and then there's economic quick wins. So the prioritization of the plan is obviously key in terms of what should take priority over the other. It doesn't mean that many projects would not be running concurrently. It just means that we have to realize that there are certain elements that has to get priority in the short term. But overall, as the governor and the premier stated, there is also a long-term plan that is in place, that many of the blocks that need to ensure that that plan is effective go into place from now. The matter of financing is one that hinges a lot on not only the projects, the plan, and the priorities, but it also hinges on the territory's ability. And when we talk about the territory's ability, we want to be able to demonstrate as a nation that we're rebuilding stronger, better, greener, and we're able to honor the commitments that financing brings with it.
Just to follow up, yeah. I heard the keyword priority and prioritization. What is most urgent? I wouldn't suggest that there is one item. I think what is urgent right now is we're getting ready for another season. And what are some of the key areas that needs to be able to be addressed, that we are ready and prepared? The other aspect that is absolutely necessary is what is considered revenue generating areas to make sure we can continue to create economic activity in this country. So there are many areas that are viewed as priority, but to pick out one.
Davion Smith, BVI News, good morning. 3 organizations or institutions are represented here this morning. So for the avoidance of doubt, going forward, once these projects get underway, if there's ever a disagreement or dispute, in terms of how a particular project should go forward, how will it be resolved? Will the RDA have full autonomy? Any 3 can feel free to answer. And Premier, you mentioned that an offer was made to Mr. Bailey monetarily. What is that offer?
The Recovery Development Agency was set up by the government of the Virgin Islands in order to facilitate the recovery from the disaster of last year, which essentially means that the recovery agency will work to the plan that's developed by the government, right? And of course, there has to be interaction, working together, but the agency, through the board it's set up, will be there to ensure that the work is done and that the monies that are allocated, either through loan financing or through monies made available by private individuals or private institutions, that it's spent in a way that it's meant to be spent according to the plan that's being provided by the government of the Virgin Islands. As far as the what's the name? What's the name now? The other question.
Mr. Bailey's offer, monetary, what was offered to him?
Yeah, as far as Mr. Bailey is concerned, I think that there's still a discussion on the offer that's being made. As soon as that's available, it will be public.
I'm not sure I understand what would be the dynamic where if a disagreement arises, how will it be? It will be resolved because evidently, as you said, there has to be interaction between these institutions.
The government of the Virgin Islands, they're the ones who set the plan. They're the ones who give to the agency the thing that they want to have done. So they're the final arbiter.
Okay.
I think if I may compliment the Premier's, the plan which is approved by government is all marching orders. And if you look at the plan, or once the plan is before us, the plan is really from a macro perspective. It's up to the technical expertise within the RDA to fine-tune what it is and present it back to government to verify that that is exactly what they would like to see. So in many cases, you will see a project come in before us, and we will develop a business case for it to be able to justify that we should proceed as planned. And what that does is it affords government to be able to understand the importance of going forward with what they have suggested as part of the plan.
Thank you all for this portion of the press conference thus far. And thank you, Your Excellency and Acting Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.